Wow. Hey, much love and respect. Pura vida, mi gente. Thanks for taking the time to tune in. I appreciate you guys being here. Today, guys, we're just going to go ahead and continue reading a very interesting book we've been reviewing, going over for educational purposes under fair use. It had some pretty interesting chapters. I think it was some deep drop. And I'm just really interested in continuing to read it, see what else is in it. I was gonna go ahead and read it on my own, and then I was like, well, I should just record it and read along with everybody, right? Get the real reaction, get the real experience, at the same time. So again, the book we're getting into again today is The Princess and the Prophet: The Secret History of Magic, Race, and Black Muslims in America by Jacob S. Dorman. Make sure to get the book if you like it for sure. Support the author. All right. Got a little PDF copy in my Patreon page that says a spectacular book in so many ways. Robin G. Kelley, author of Freedom Dreams. All right. So before I begin reading, make sure, just in case you're new, that you haven't seen the previous reviews of this book, the previous readings for educational purposes. I have a playlist created just for that. In case you missed the readings, you might be a little lost to what they're saying, today, in case you hear something, you're like, what is he talking about? Well, you gotta have the context that we've gone over already. Great review. The name of the playlist is The Princess and the Prophet, just like the book. You can find it on my playlist section in my YouTube channel. Just go to my playlist tab on my main page, and you'll see all my playlist guys there. Okay, in case you missed any of the previous videos, I try to organize it for you there so you can watch them in order. All right, let's go to the book now. We're gonna belly flop to chapter 6, and it says here, White Tops. It says the wit of the clown was highly original and being directed principally against the Negroes was highly relished and vociferously applauded. What does that mean? It almost sounds like they created the clowns to make fun of black folks or go against black folks. And then it makes me think, ain't clowns usually a white face? Don't they paint their faces white in general? That made me think a little bit. What exactly are they saying? Let's see. It says Anonymous, Topeka, Kansas, 1867. In 1893, the year that the Columbian Exposition and the show in Old Kentucky, remember this popular Broadway show that the so-called magician guy here, whose actual name is Walter, right? Brister. When he was young, he was part of that show on Broadway. Talking about black folks who eventually are playing, Hindus or, Egyptian mystics, whatever, it's part of the circus whole thing. So, again, sorry for interrupting. Let's continue. It says the Sells Brothers Circus, right after the show in Old Kentucky and the Columbian Exposition, after they both opened, the Sells Brothers Circus had trumpeted the coming of Hassan ben Ali's Moorish caravan, Arabian Nights, entertainment and spectacular pilgrimage to Mecca, as the orientally splendid and weirdly romantic spectacular pilgrimage to Mecca, introducing the only Berber and Bedouin tribal caravan of Moorish barbarians and warriors, or all in parentheses, that's how they introduce these people. And remember, a lot of these people are just regular black folks that they were born in the States. Their family, their grandparents are born in the States. They're not from any of those places. The circus covered the sides of barns and buildings across America, with gorgeous full-color lithographs depicting a colorful caravan winding past a desert oasis, with camels carrying litters topped by Islam's crescent moon. They were white-robed soldiers on noble Arabian stallions, women with veils, and men wearing colorful turbans. All right, turbans, headscarves, curly-toed blue Moroccan slippers, and capacious robes. The whole procession was led by four men with dark skin and black African features representing Moors, and there were also olive-skinned maidens and swarthy, bearded men. The poster was one of 30 DeSales brothers plastered across the country to announce its North American tour, and their headliner Hassan Ben Ali. Another featured a picture of 10 men wearing fezzes, right? Fezzes forming a human tower, while other men in fezzes twirled guns, juggled swords, and performed flips, all in front of an ornate Moroccan courtyard with a two-story arcade, jagged crenellations on the fortified walls, and a minaret in the background. Its text read, "A whole amazing Sahara Desert circus, wild Berber and Bedouin Moors, and strange and prodigious illustrations of ability and strength." Other posters featured pictures of camel or elephant races, although more traditional circus fare, such as acrobats, horse races, and trapeze artists were more commonly the pictorial subject of the posters, whose masthead remained constant. Sales Brothers, Roman Hippodrome, three-ring circus, two elevated stages, five-continent menagerie imperial Japanese troupe, combined with Hassan Ben Ali's Moorish caravan, Arabian Nights entertainment, and spectacular pilgrimage to Mecca. The Hassan Ben Ali posters demonstrate that his show did not just depict the common Orientalist tropes of harem girls, fakers, remember what that meant in the last reading, right? We were talking about it, and fierce mounted warriors, but made an attraction out of Islam itself. All right, they made what? An attraction out of what? Out of Islam itself. And its Hajj, or the orientally splendid and weirdly romantic, spectacular pilgrimage to Mecca. Indeed, Islamic Orientalist pageantry and visions of Oriental grandeur, opulence, and otherness were stock elements of European and American circuses in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. The contemporary circus originated with exhibitions of trick horse riding in the 1760s. All right, you guys hear that, in England. And the centrifugal force needed to keep a standing rider on the back of a cantering horse determined the dimensions of the circus ring. The growth and spread of the circus, like the spread of Freemasonry, listen to this, was coterminous with both the Enlightenment and spread of European empires into Asian, Muslim, and African lands. Riders on horseback race around the circus ring, sometimes pantomiming patriotic scenes from cavalry battles as wars, revolutions, and real cavalry charges circled and transformed the globe. The equestrian circus spread to France by 1772, and John Bill Ricketts began the first American circus with horses and clowning in Philadelphia in 1792. Wow. Where it found favor with President George Washington, the swarthy man, right? Himself an avid horseman. That was also the year that the French Revolution spawned several decades of war around the globe between France, Britain, Austro-Hungary, and Russia, contributing to the decline of the Spanish and Portuguese empires, the rise of the Russian and British empires, the Haitian Revolution of 1791 to 1804, the Simon Bolivar-inspired Latin American revolutions of 1808 and 1826, and the unification of the countries of Italy in 1861 and Germany in 1871. The circus's equestrian art form came to harness the exponentially greater power of the iron horses that pulled ever increasing amounts of cargo across the country's growing network of railroad tracks. There were unsatisfactory experiments with circus travel by rail beginning in 1856, but railroad circuses only took off with the cessation of the Civil War and the standardization and the exponential growth of railroad tracks that followed. In America, the golden age of the circus from 1871 to 1915 was facilitated not only by the consolidation and growth of the U.S. nation state, but also, as with the nation itself, by the power of railroads, which the circus harnessed to multiply its size, grandeur, and geographical reach. Orientalist depictions of Asian and Muslim subjects featured prominently in the circus parades that wound their way through American cities and towns when the first traveling tented circuses appeared as early as 1825. In the decades that followed, circus parades with richly ornamented and carved wagons dazzled Americans, announcing the arrival of the tented spectacles. In 1848, one of the very first accounts of an American circus parade noted the Il Signor Germani, the great rider of Italy, would appear representing the Hindu miracles of an East Indian juggler, attired in the exact costume and cast of his tribe, with an orrery of golden globes and sacred daggers, the sacred vase of destiny and fated bullet. Throughout the 19th and early 20th centuries, typical circus parades included an Asia wagon, with carved representations of Asian peoples on its sides, and sometimes an Africa wagon, which included representations of North African Arabs, along with those of sub-Saharan Africans, helping to construct a continental image of Africa in the minds. Listen, construct a continental image of Africa in the minds of all Americans. These were people acting that commingled Muslim and non-Muslim African peoples. Across America, in small towns and large cities alike, the American circus provided a constant and colorful stream of images of human otherness, in addition to representations of the United States, Russia, and Great Britain. A typical Barnum and Bailey circus parade from 1916 included a cage with 4 horses and 6 Orientals, a tableau India, and 5 Arab boys in their own wardrobe riding horses. Few things could have seemed more exotic or more exciting in Gilded Age America than visions of multi-hued, brightly colored, bedecked and bedazzled, alluring and forbidden, Moorish, right, in parentheses, Bedouin, in parentheses, Persian, in parentheses, Arab, in parentheses, Indian, in parentheses, or Egyptian, in parentheses, wonders. All right, this is what people were being fed, the image. And even though it was actors, a lot of people weren't what they were acting. A lot of these were Americans. From exotic animals to fierce Bedouin warriors and seductive, veiled harem beauties. The tales of the Arabian Nights featured prominently in these depictions. The Sells Brothers Circus later combined with the Hagenbeck Wallace and Forepaugh circuses and put together a show called The Pageant of Persia, the glorious origins of the Arabian Nights, whose poster featured a white-bearded ruler surrounded by a comely courtesan and a wild menagerie of colorfully attired attendants and animals. This image was the source for a later image on the poster of the Al-Jibarn Circus called Persia and the Pageant of Pekin, which then made the leap around 1916 to the Barnum and Bailey Circus as Persia or the Pageants of the 1001 Nights, the most gorgeous Oriental display ever seen in any land since the world began. All right, that was the complete title. Later, perhaps when this show had worn thin, the Barnum and Bailey Circus featured 5 different posters of the supreme pageant of Aladdin and his wonderful lamp, which was always depicted along with images of Chinese processions, illustrating the mix up quality of American Orientalism and his willingness to fuse the Near and Far East. All right, combining Arab stuff with Chinese stuff, and people didn't know the difference. And these circus, this is what he's letting you know. Exotic animals were even more prevalent than exotic humans in the circus. In the golden age of the circus, almost every show had both camels and dromedaries. In 1875, the European circus had advertised an oriental music car drawn by Egyptian camels, with a picture of a dozen musicians in turbans, towed by a team of 8 dozen camels, wearing blankets, covered in Islamic stars and crescent moons. In the early 20th century, the Ringling Brothers had a camel corpse, with a team of 16 camels pulling an Egypt float decorated with sphinxes and dark-skinned people in front of pyramids. The Four-Paw Cell Circus had a similar Egypt wagon pulled by 8 camels in 1911. Occasionally, the circus veered into the realm of the scientific, such as the time in 1895 when Barnum and Bailey's greatest show on Earth staged the Great Ethnological Congress, which displayed humans representing exotic cultures next to cages of exotic animals in the spacious and colossal menagerie tent. The circus freak show, with its fat ladies and fleshless men, its giants, midgets, piebald Negroes, and Siamese twins, had always capitalized on human morphological differences, just as its exotic animals were kind of animal freaks. The massive lions, the long-necked giraffes, and the humpback camels gained the appeal partly from their freakish deviation from domesticated beasts of burden familiar to Americans in both urban and rural settings. Barnum and Bailey's ethnological. All right, and here's one of the actors right here. Sorry, that's him right there. Little Drew Ali, little Walter Brister, or Arma Sotanki, a Hindu magician used for the Pawnee Bill Wild West show, and the John Robinson Circus. All right, his name was Walter Brister. He was playing a Hindu magician, but he was from the States. He was in the Pawnee Bill Wild West show. All right. At the right distance from the page, one may be able to see the dark mold on the right side of his nose, below the corner of his right eye, halfway between that point and the tip of his nose. All right. This guy has a mold here, and there's a reason he's pointing that out. Somebody else later on has a mold in the same spot. All right. Thomas. Thomas Drew. Yeah. And then look at some other pictures, right? 3 boys perform the Cairo exhibit, and then this is Harry Houdini. That's Houdini, the famous Houdini, right? So this is Cairo streets in the World's Fair in Chicago. All right. In Chicago, actually. That looks like the Middle East, huh? So they're talking about Barnum and Bailey's ethnological show. So look, fire friends put torch to White City. This is when they were burning the World Fairs. Look at that, 1893. The Columbian Exposition amidst economic and social turmoil following the close of the fair and the panic of 1893. All right. Gordon W. Lilly, aka Pawnee Bill, the hero of Oklahoma, and his sharpshooting wife, May. They're not showing a good image. She looks a little like she could be like mulatto, honestly. You know, what people will say mulatto, you know. And that, you know, there goes the Ali brothers, Arabian acrobats. All right. And some more images here. So they're kind of showing you some of these posters, right? A lithograph for the Hassan Ben Ali group showing some of the daring human pyramids. All right, so this is what they were selling. Again, Barnum and Bailey's ethnological Congress incorporated the new label of ethnology into a longer history of freak show spectacles in the context of a world that was being thoroughly colonized by European powers. One might even argue that by exhibiting people representing imperial possessions, the circus helped to normalize colonization for Americans and Europeans alike. You guys hear that? The World's Fairs. This is what they were doing in these World Fairs, right? Rewriting history, brainwashing people, brainwashing the inheritors, the incubator babies, all that, making it normal. The colonization. The circus was a quintessential populist art form, and it found audiences among all sectors, races, genders, and classes in 19th and early 20th century America, okay? Even before the intensification of Jim Crow's in the 1890s, Black audiences frequently sat in segregated seating areas. But there is also evidence that segregation was sometimes enforced less rigidly in the slightly disreputable setting of the circus tent. Everybody went, all classes, ages, colors, and conditions, wrote Hiram Fuller in 1858, describing a circus in Newport, Rhode Island. There was as many as 5,000 people there, all mixed up with the most democratic indiscrimination. Fifth Avenue belles sitting on narrow boards alongside of Irish chambermaids and colored people of all sizes and sexes. Many southern states passed Jim Crow statutes mandating segregation at the circus relatively late, not until the middle of the 20th century's second decade. African Americans were, Dash the Hijack, so-called blacks were a sought-after audience for traveling tented shows. Traveling circuses tended to follow the harvest cycle throughout rural America, when field hands would have had a little bit of money to spend on leisure, and no place had a greater density of circuses and traveling minstrel shows than Mississippi. Listen, during the cotton harvest, all right? Taking advantage of the black folks when they getting paid, huh? In the words of a performer with the Silas Green Minstrel Company, Mississippi isn't a large state, but it's one of your greatest cotton states and has a great race population of real show-going people. During harvest time, in 1925, Mississippi boasted an astounding convergence of 7 black minstrel shows, 1 white minstrel show, and 2 major circuses, the Spark Brothers and the Ringling Brothers, Barnum and Bailey Circus. You guys hear this? Minstrel shows, listen. In other words, the circus's version of Orientalist spectacle and Arabian delights undoubtedly reach Americans of all genders and races and classes, including race in parentheses, men and women. But you see what they were doing, right? They were brainwashing people into believing that's what these people look like, right? Whatever Orientalists they were portraying in these circuses, they were making it normal to be colonized. Noble Drew Ali, was not only one who created African identities for Afro Americans, the circus was in the business of exhibiting and commercially exploiting human difference, with a healthy dose of humbug and a little regard for ethnological accuracy. In so doing, it provided venues in which Afro Americans, right, so-called black folks, Americans, right, could have a living by impersonating Africans. Impersonating Africans, not actual Africans, but just impersonating them. Listen, performing and commodifying racial difference. In the 1890s, at least 4 performers claimed to be Africans or African princes, 2 of whom were circus performers, one of whom was a lecturer, and another of whom was a singer, a musician. All right, this is getting deep, guys, right here. Watch, it's about to get deep. Continuing. For example, a man calling himself J. Tip, the Zulu Prince, appeared in Yazoo City, Mississippi, in September of 1891, claiming to be a native African of the fearless Zulu tribe. Oh man, trying to raise money to help assist three sisters attending school in Washington, D.C. All right, he was scamming people, basically. The following month, he turned up in St. Louis and gave his name as J. Tipo Tip, Victoria Flossie, Sulu, Duncan Omish, son of King Setowa, Totowa. He's a whole different guy now. Although he also answered to the more prosaic alias of Mr. Dempsey Powers. Dempsey Powers, that was probably his real name. He sang the well-known gospel hymn, Come to Jesus, with improvised African words. Hijack on top of hijack, yo. Only a week later, however, the Kansas City American Citizen reported that the Zulu prince was a first-class fraud. Oh, really? And a South Carolinian who learned of Africa from a showman. He was from South Carolina, and he learned about Africa from the circus, guys. The race problem paper of St. Louis reported that Tipo Tip had been employed by P.T. Barnum's circus, listen, to play a Zulu youth. And that so well did he learn his part that he concluded he was just from Africa, sure enough. Wow, yo, body bag for the illusion. Yo, this is big right here. How many people did this, guys? You see how they got influenced. You see how they started there. They're like, man, I was so good acting like an African. I might as well, keep doing it. I'm going to just keep telling people I am. And he believed it. He did it. He was part of B.T. Barnum's circus, guys. He was a Zulu. He was playing a Zulu, man. And he was from South Carolina, actually. You guys hear that, right? Despite the paper's assertion that he knew no more about African customs and habits than an unlettered rustic does about Blackstone's commentaries. All right, he didn't know anything about Africa. He'd never been there. Tipo Tip enrolled in Central Tennessee State College in Nashville and gave a lecture as a visiting speaker in July of 1892. Listen, on the habits and customs of his people. Wow, he just made it all up. Wow, you see, he got invited as a Zulu prince and he was faking that. Can you guys believe that? Listen, this is real history. That's why I like reading this book. This book be going into detail about certain things that I would never have researched. Like, wow, that literally proves our research. It shows how fake, how fraudulent history could be, how fake people can be with history, right? So he gave a lecture about his people, right? African, right? The fake Zulu that he was from. He wasn't from there. But according to the Detroit Plain Dealer, things truly fell apart for the erstwhile African the following month when he was exposed in Covington, Kentucky, and accused of being a scurrilous thief, robber, and assassin. Another man claiming to be the real Zulu chief, Mata Monsaro, accused Tipo Tip of being an Arabian. He's like, nah, that's the Arabian type from Yemen, right? Like the Yoruba, assuming the nationality of an African. Wow. Saro was convinced that his rival performances had thwarted his own success as a lecturer and said, were he to meet him again on his route, he would smack him so that he would feel and know that the Zulu's power. Wow, he said, if I ever see this guy, I'm going to smack him for trying to beat us. As Saro's accusation indicate, there was money to be made on the lecture circuit by performing as an African. And Tipo Tip's story shows that performances of Africanness in the circus could cross over into lecture and performance circuits in black churches and colleges. Oh, this is getting deep, guys. I'm trying to tell you, he's trying to go somewhere with this. I'm trying to tell you, he's trying to go somewhere with this. It's all a show. These world fairs were the seeds for a lot of this stuff, right? The most successful African, right, in parentheses, circus performer may have been Prince Okasuma or Oskasuma, who was referred to as the well-known copper-colored African. Huh? Copper-colored African, huh? Oh, he tried to hijack the copper color, huh? Oh, he knew he was copper colored, but he did. Oh, come on now. Copper-colored African, huh? And the African prince and warrior. So this is what he was calling himself, right? Prince Oskasuma. He toured with the Cells, the Cells brothers, right? We were reading about earlier, and Renfro Circus in 1893. Then retired to join a company of singers, and by turn of the century had joined up with Buffalo Bill's Cody's Wild West show, where he was billed as an African warrior, lecturer, mimic, fire fiend. I told you guys earlier, a lot of these people traveling with these people were just regular black folks from the States. The people from the States, the grandparents were from the States, you know, and they were just pretending, being actors, pretending, acting as they were these African warriors or whatever. As it's telling you right here clearly, guys, okay? Another alleged Zulu illustrates how intertwined these performances of Africanity were with circus performances. Orlando Gibson, who went by the name Bonio Mosquigo and sang hymns in an African language, also performed various feats of strength and courage, such as walking on broken glass, putting a rope in his mouth and defying the strongest man in the audience to pull it out, lifting a man with his teeth and putting a glass of water in his hand and defying 6 of the strongest men in the house to prevent him from drinking. Gibson's performance combined in elements associated with various racial groups who met under the circus big tops, singing like that associated with colored minstrels, walking on glass like Islamic Hindu fakers, and feats of strength associated with circus strongmen of all nationalities, feats that Walter Brister would also perform to establish his preternatural abilities. Walter Brister, when he presented himself as Noble Drew Ali, the Muslim prophet. Uh-oh. I know. Uh-oh. I'm telling you, man, like, hey, you remember his birth and origin and past is very mysterious. And these guys are used to, on a good show. We should definitely dig into it a lot more. The truth will come out eventually. If it's not true, then it's not true. If it's true, it will be exposed. In addition to African princess, which satiated a certain fascination with royalty and nobility among savage, in parentheses, and Oriental peoples, Barnum and Bailey's circus also featured degrading images of Africans, such as a tribe of savages from the wilds of darkest Africa, and the famous Sip, representing the missing link between apes and humans, right? So they were on this really bad racist kind of, exhibits they were doing, and all for money, And then it says Barnum had displayed a black person as a missing link. Can you guys hear that? That's all messed up. He displayed see, they were racist. And they called the what is it? They called them what is it? You guys hear that? As early as 1860, thereby profiting from the social Darwinist idea. Darwinist ideas like out of Africa theories. That's a part of Darwinist ideas, that people of recent African descent were less evolved than Europeans and that a proto-human ancestor might be alive in the dim recesses of the dark continent. That was Darwinism, right? William Henry Johnson, a microcephalic black American from New Jersey with a steeply sloping forehead and a pointy shaved head, wearing a furry suit and carrying a staff, inhabited the role of Sip from at least 1865, when he was photographed by famous Civil War photographer Matthew Brady, until his death in 1826. Wow. He was from the States, guys. You guys see what they were doing? They were using this guy, calling him the missing link, and then trying to make him into like an African, right? Like from the remote jungles. Like they found this guy. That's crazy. In 1922, after Johnson as Sip put on a show of speaking native Zulu in parentheses for newspaper editors and being frightened of flashbulbs, a reporter caught up with him on the sidewalk. Great life, this Wildman stuff, he remarked. I was in a crap game last night with the guy who took my photograph. I won. He lost. He ought to be the wild one. Wow. He's letting you, that's how he got the gig. As historian Robert Bogdan explains, Johnson operated in a freak show world where the outsider was held in contempt. Life was about tricking the rube and making money. Johnson may have been embodying a racist role, but he was also, in his own modest way, one of the most famous black performers of his era. He had posed for a photographer who had also photographed Abraham Lincoln and had performed for over 100 million people over the course of his long career. The circus allowed black Americans to not only impersonate Africans, but to make good money doing so. All right. It's still not a good thing. I don't know if they're trying to sugarcoat it or like, hey, they gave them an opportunity. So-called black it's still a racist kind of tone to it, right? Yeah. These people did anything, whatever it was, for money. Yeah, we get it. Not everybody did that though. Or would do that to themselves, portray themselves as a missing link, go with a lie. You know. Anyways, continues, says, not bound by any scientific scruples, committed only to spectacle, wonder, and the marvelous, the circus and its allied arts were willing to combine anything that sparkled and dazzled, whether it was Persia and Pekin or India and Arabia. If the spectacle they presented was only a fraction as gorgeous and opulent as the posters they left behind, they would have been impressive to behold. Barnum and Bailey produced one particularly beautiful series of posters in 1914, when the circus was still exhibiting the savage Africans, in parentheses, and the missing link, in parentheses, in its freak shows, right? And again, a lot of time it's just Americans posing, acting. These posters announced Barnum and Bailey's new big Indo-Arabic spectacle, The Wizard Prince of Arabia, with a poster featuring dozens of bejeweled and custom Indian, in parentheses, and Arabic, in parentheses, girls, right? Again, a lot of these are just regular black folks, guys, dancing with shapely legs, half cocked in what looks to be a can-can, framed by elephants and palm trees, and bookended by capering clowns in the style of the Italian Commedia dell'arte. The caption promised dazzling, dancing scene in the magical, mighty, wordless play, combining the weird wizardry of India and Arabia, an opulent Oriental grandeur. A reporter for the New York Times caught the show and described the opening spectacle as a pantomime and ballet telling the story of Abdallah, Wizard Prince of Arabia, who after many wonderful adventures won the hand of Princess Alo Sasaran, daughter of the mighty King Babar, whose magic city and palace were the wonder of all India. In contrast to the circus's degrading depictions, listen, of black people, the Indian Wizard Prince of Arabia represented racial others in favorable, if stereotypical terms. The city and palace of King Babar were represented with gorgeous scenery high upon a stage constructed at the east end of the arena. The Times wrote, leading down from the palace front were spacious steps by which members of the ballet, courtiers, and ladies descended to a low platform that covered almost the entire palace garden. Here the ballet company dancing long, sinuous lines, and the leading actors in their resplendent costumes strutted before the audience. It was as if a bizarre fever dream of Bollywood production roamed American cities and hinterlands underneath circus big tops during the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Can you guys picture that? Back in those times, spreading professed weird, in parentheses, and strange, in parentheses, visions of Oriental opulence and grandeur. taking Americans along an orientally splendid and weirdly romantic, spectacular pilgrimage to Mecca. All right, this is what they were portraying. While Black Americans frequently worked behind the scenes, all right, behind the scenes, or on the bandstands at America's circuses. There were relatively few roles open to Black performers in the circuses themselves until the rise of Black minstrel performers at the end of the 19th century. Even most blackface performers were white. In the 1890s, however, the new fad of combining black and white performers and mixed minstrelsy provided a transition to the primacy of black minstrel performers in the new century. On occasion, these mixed minstrels troupes included performances of ethnicities other than the stock racist caricatures of black rubes that peopled most minstrel shows. Sometimes such companies presented Black Americans portraying African, Arab, or even Japanese characters, okay? Even Japanese characters. How could Black Americans portray? Because in those times, guys, if you look at the pictures of Japan and China, in those times, a lot of very swarthy, so called Black Japanese people, Negroid people. Especially popular among Black minstrels' performances were absurd caricatures of Africans, commonly using the reference of Dahomey and Zulu. They were making it all up. These portrayals, right? Again, portrayals, it wasn't real, gained popularity following the exhibition of a Dahomean village at the World's Columbian Exposition in Chicago, 1893. You see, they were portraying themselves as Dahomean people, guys, in these world fairs. You see how they tricked everybody and they convinced the inheritors. They were like, look, this is what an African looks like. That's an African right there. And these were Black Americans, so-called Black Americans, right? The leading comedy team of Bert Williams and George Walker, who called themselves the Two Real Coons, started in a show called The Sons of Ham in New York in 1901, which included hits such as My Little Zulu Babe, wow, In My Castle on the River Now, and The Phrenologist Coon, wow. Williams and Walker were known for a kind of coon song that was less offensive than the normal fare of fried chicken, snaffles, or watermelon capers. You guys hear this? Wow. That's why this book gets a little deep, right? In My Castle on the River Now, boosted music by J. Rosamond Johnson and lyrics by Robert Cole and James Weldon Johnson, the future head of the NAACP, the future heads of the NAACP and brother of Rosamond. All right, body bag for the illusion. Yo, shout out to Drop, man. You guys hear this, right? Why were they helping with this racist views? Why were they a part of that? You guys hear that? The future head of the NAACP. Wow. Man. I just gotta take a deep breath. Ooh, oh, wow. The phrenologist Coon was a witty send-up of the racist science of phrenology, which had attempted to determine character and intellectual traits by skull shape. You guys hear that? And that's what the dude was helping with? That's what he was helping with, the future head of the NAACP? It's all a show, guys. It's all a show talking about, it's not just in the circus, it's in real life too. Often mixed minstrel shows exhibited Arabs or Moorish Bedouin Arabs in parentheses, performing feats commonly associated with the circus. Likewise, another white minstrel show proprietor named Algie Field put a company of genuine Negroes, right, in parentheses, and Arabs, in parentheses, on the road in the fall of 1894, beginning in Columbus, Ohio, with ambitions to conduct national and international tours, dubbed the Algie Field Real Negro Minstrels and Troupe of Arabs. The show joined together performers representing Arabs with colored singers recruited from an actual Charleston camp meeting along with other ethnographically minded depictions of Southern Black life. In parentheses, it says the show will not be of the old style of Negro minstrelsy, the newspaper announced. To introduce scenes peculiar to the South will be the aim of the management. Yet old minstrelsy or new, the show still featured slapstick firemen, comedic watermelon scenes, you guys hear that? And gauzy representations of the plantation South in slavery times. Likewise, in 1895, white minstrel impresario William S. Cleveland put together a minstrel show boosting white minstrels, genuine colored, white minstrels, genuine colored in parentheses, minstrels, Japanese contortionists, jugglers, and gymnasts, and 15 Moorish Bedouin Arab, in parentheses, acrobats, tromblers, musicians, and equilibrists performing skills commonly associated with the circus. Just as circuses stage elaborate parades to announce their arrival in a new location, the All Nations, listen, in parentheses, minstrel shows stage an elaborate parade showing off their Moorish Bedouin Arab, in parentheses, performers in all their Oriental finery. Cleveland claimed that his was the only minstrel company with an internationalist, All Nations, in parentheses, theme, but the performance certainly echoed the Barnum Circus Ethnological Congress, as well as the ethnographic spectacles of the world's fairs. Interestingly, while Cleveland billed his Arab performers as Moorish Bedouin Arabs, clearly stressing their blackness as Moors, their blackness as Moors. You guys are here, they're building this image right here, guys. Listen, newspaper accounts of the show labeled them simply Arabs, indicating that ragtime Americans readily accepted black people as Arabs. All right? And it makes sense because who was the ruling class of Africa, right? What have we been learning about them? Where are they really coming from? The true Arabs, huh? We remember minstrelsy as a white on black crime, but blacks also got into the act of impersonating themselves and others. Ernest Hogan was a black minstrel star and pioneer of vaudevilized minstrelsy, who in 1896 penned the ironic hit that made fun of white racers' ignorance. All coons look alike to me, in parentheses, it says. Hogan often performed in companies that included specialists in the impersonation of European and Asian national groups. In 1902, Hogan appeared in Honolulu, Hawaii, with a black performer impersonating the Chaser, a real estate speculator. A chaser, real estate speculator. In the words of the local Hawaiian paper, Henry Hand, wise as a black-faced Hebrew, was fairly good, there being a straining at some points, but with all careful representation of the anxious real estate man. All right, and that was a so-called black man portraying, right, the so-called Hebrew, right, or the Chaser. In 1906, Hogan toured the East and the Midwest with a show he produced and starred in called Rufus Rastus. And among his understudies were several character actors who excelled at stereotypical comedic depictions of non-blacks. The cast included Harry Fiddler, the man of many faces, who at times pulled down the corners of his eyes in an Asian impersonation, and Tom Logan, who was equally at home with straight roles and grotesque character work, such as Chinese, Italian, Dutch, Jew, and other impersonations. Similarly, Archie Jones and John Baptiste Verdun were two character comedians from New Orleans who specialized in impersonating, you know, Jewish characters. All right, listen, guys, who's doing all these impersonations? In 1910, the Florida Blossom Minstrel staged an elaborate comedic skit called B. Grabenheimer's African Colony, in parentheses, in which Verdun, in the title role of the Jewish immigration agent, created his colony with the help of a cast of characters that included Tody Roosevelt and Dr. Kilme M. Quick, or Kill M. Quick. The plot summary does not survive, but presumably the skid made fun of the Chazars, the safari-loving former president, and the many plans for black colonization of Africa that began with the founding of the American Colonization Society in 1807. All right? Say what? Black colonization of Africa by Americans, guys. Listen, and peaked with the efforts of the Episcopal Reverend Alexander Cromwell, who lived in Liberia from 1853 to 1872, and the plans of the African Methodists, right? Right, is that what it is? The AME Bishop Henry McNeil Turner, who led two boatloads of immigrants to Liberia in the 1890s, right? People from the Americas, guys, going over there, whether they were Indians or Black Europeans, right? They were going over there, colonizing West Africa. You guys don't know about that. Between 1910 and 1914, the same Verdun appeared with Allen's Minstrels in a skit called The Jew and the Coon, which no doubt gave a politically incorrect view of what would later come to be called Black-Jewish relations. To be sure, by far the most common act of racial imposture on the minstrel stage was the performance of ignorant, absurd coon caricatures, but the black, authentic minstrels that began to dominate the minstrel stage in the age of ragtime also signified on other ethnicities, holding up the Chazars, Chinese, Italians, and others to the sort of ridicule commonly dealt out to Americans of African descent. That's the hijack of Americans, right? So-called Black Americans, he means. Impersonating the Yiddish-inflected speech of European Chazars with a distinct performance genre among Black religious figures as well as entertainers, just as some Black performers made money by impersonating African princess. Okay? Impersonating what? African princess. Who? Black Americans, so-called Black Americans. Some Black Israelites, such as Rabbi Warren Robertson, would do the same in interwar New York by asking for contributions from Jews of European origin while impersonating their Yiddish-inflected speech and mannerisms. Oh, wow, you guys hear that? Yeah. Sometimes Black minstrels and tent show performers did not simply portray people from other parts of the world, but actually had opportunities to travel the world themselves. Tented minstrelsy provided global mobility for Black musicians, and it was not uncommon for Black performers to travel to Sydney, Australia in the 1890s. Sometimes they ranged much farther afield. Pearl Maupin, a hoop roller and trombonist from Kansas City, Missouri, spent 2 years between 1912 and 1914 touring through the Hawaiian Islands, Fiji, Samoa, New Zealand, Tasmania, Australia, Ceylon, India, Persia, Arabia, Somaliland, Abyssinia, Palestine, Egypt, Crete, Sicily, Italy, Corsica, Sardinia, Morocco, France, Spain, Portugal, England, and Ireland. All right, you see all the places she got to go because she was in these circuses, these minstrel shows. Wow, traveling the world, guys. It may have been the height of Jim Crow and lynch law in the American South, and many Black Americans may have tied uh, to sharecropping the land and suffering racist violence. But for the few talented Black performers able to escape and earn a living on the popular performance circuit, it was a small world after all. The Orient itself was so heterodox, colorful, and exotic in American eyes that it was sometimes described as a circus itself, as when the leading Black newspaper, the Chicago Defender, wrote in 1922, "The life that ebbs and flows along some of the streets of Cairo is like nothing so much as a circus parade back home." Huh. Circuses had employed the people, animals, and aura of the Islamic Orient for so long that now the Islamic Orient could be explained as such. What stood out most to the Defender's observer was the tremendous diversity of people, animals, and things in the busy Cairo streets. Deliberate camels move along, brightly dressed riders perched upon them, or with suspended cars in which are veiled damsels, while drummers thunder their rhythm, and five blowers emit their shrill notes, wrote the defender. Snake charmers pass along with their bags of snakes. Magicians perform in some nook, bullock, carts, and laden donkeys compete for space with shining limousines. For Black Americans, the Orient represented a subversive heterogeneity and stood as a rebuke to the sterile segregation of the American Jim Crow system. In an article titled All Races Found in Cairo City, Great Metropolis, on River Nile is now very cultured, the defender reported. Cairo is a living kaleidoscope. Its colored fragments are tumbled into place not merely from east and west, but from north and south as well. White robed Bedouin, ill clad Fella, shiny black Sudanese, and Central African Negro, swarthy Turk, Persian Hindu, Mongolian, dusky Moor, Italian, Greek, Armenian, and the white folk from Europe, America, and their antipodes all are jumbled together in Cairo, right? In these times, right? In the 1890s, I guess, that's what Cairo looked like. Their various tongues making a babel that can hardly be duplicated at any other spot on earth. All right, guys, that's what Cairo was like those days. By asserting that Cairo was cultured, in addition to being racially heterogeneous, the Chicago Defender was implicitly rebuking racist Americans who asserted that racial mixing was a symptom of a society not having attained an advanced level of civilization. Implicitly, the Orient's heterodoxy stood as a wonderful reminder for Black Americans of how bizarre, juvenile, rude, and uncultured the Jim Crow segregation system truly was. Images of the Orient suggested not simply the marvelous strange, but hinted at the potential for radically different ways of ordering society. Black Americans who attended the circus then would have seen Africans denigrated and degraded, while Arabs, Muslims, and subcontinental Indians were stereotyped and celebrated. Given that the missing link was obviously specious, right? A melancholy spectacle of a black man in a monkey suit. Wow, that's messed up. The notion that Black Americans could have been descended from noble, romantic, dashing, and dangerous, dark-skinned African Muslim Moors was far less insulting and indeed far more plausible than many of the other anthropological ideas circulating in the popular culture of the age of empire, right? So that is the end of that chapter, guys. And we're going to come back to the next chapter really quick, okay? Because it's getting pretty interesting, right? So I think, he's getting into something. I hope you understand what he's trying to tell you here. A lot of black folks got their acting skills or their show performance, pretending to be portraying other people in these circuses, in these world fairs. Yeah, and there were a lot of black folks portraying a lot of these Oriental people, okay? That's what he was letting you know. I hope you enjoyed the reading. I know it was a little shorter, but the next chapter is a lot more interesting. We'll go ahead and get into that as well. And I hope you guys are enjoying, in general, all the videos I upload. Check out my Brutus, video of the tribe of Judah. Brutus from the tribe of Judah, the guy they named Britain after, progenitor of the Britons, right? Coming out of Darda, coming out of the line of Sarah, sons of Judah. Okay, check out that video I dropped yesterday. All right. I appreciate you guys again. This is the book. Again, we were reading The Princess and the Prophet, The Secret History of Magic, Race, and Black Muslims in America. All right. Much love and respect. Pura vida, mi gente. Wow.
Praise Happy Faust.